The Chinese economy has entered a danger zone. For the first time in over 2 years, consumer prices in the country are in free fall. The ghost of deflation that haunted the world in the 1929 crisis is back. But now the threat comes precisely from the second largest economy on the planet, the one that grew the most in recent decades and ended up becoming the biggest factory in the world. If China sneezes, the planet could catch pneumonia. It's like a time bomb waiting to explode in the heart of globalization.
Now it's countdown to avoid chaos. But how did China end up in this cold?
It all started with COVID-19. When the pandemic subsided, unlike in the West, the Chinese did not go out in force spending their savings in bars, restaurants, and shops. Consumption did not take off, and the prices that rose like rockets here did not even move there.
Worse, since February 2021, Chinese inflation has been 0.0. Now it finally plummeted 0.3% in July alone. Apparently small numbers, right?
That is, a 0.3% deflation is a small thing, but it can be thought of as an iceberg inside of the largest economy in the world. But Professor, isn't deflation a decrease in prices? Isn't everything cheap good?
The free fall in prices has a devastating effect.
It stops investments, increases unemployment, impoverishes the population, and stops consumption in an endless loop.
Companies stop hiring and investing, since low prices end up discouraging the expansion of production.
If production decreases, the demand for raw materials, components, and machines also decreases, which also ends up lowering these prices. In order to try to reduce supply as a result of the drop in demand, employees are fired. Euphemistically, so as not to cause a fight, employees are fired.
With less employment and income, people buy even less, and the infernal spiral of deflation feeds back.
A potential positive impact of a prolonged period of deflation in the Chinese country could be the containment of price increases in other parts of the world.
However, the containment of inflation can quickly expand the inflationary process to other parts of the planet.
When we think about it, we can have a kind of déjà vu. The biggest economic crisis of the last 100 years was exactly marked by deflation. If Chinese investments in the world retract at the same rate that American investments retracted in 1929, the consequences, which at first can be seen as positive for countries still struggling with rising inflation, could quickly turn into a world crisis with the shrinkage of the value of the product. Think of the circulation of Chinese products with ever lower prices. What will become of the retail chains of the world's domestic economies? The natural consequence of this would be a decrease in investments and unemployment being exported all over the world. In that context of 1929, inflation rather than the villain was the medicine, the antidote. We cannot forget this when we think of a deflationary crisis. The Chinese government has insisted that everything is under control, but has so far avoided any major steps to spur economic growth. The Chinese long-term view is not easily understood by us Westerners, even by those of the classical school of liberal economics, who have always valued the long term as the time for the economy to return to equilibrium and the optimal point. The point is to find out how the government will try to stimulate demand so that the market heats up and families abandon saving, returning the marginal propensity to consume to a positive level.
I think we're going to have to see some significant stimulus measures, including lowering interest rates and encouraging investment and discouraging savings.
We can also think of measures such as subsidies that encourage the reduction of agricultural production, encourage the renegotiation of employment contracts that increase workers' income, increasing the cost of production.
These are measures that can affect supply and put pressure on prices at first. Of course, for those who prefer to look at China from the Western liberal point of view, which in my view seems to be a mistake, the solution would simply be to cut taxes, which would reduce the interventionist capacity of the state. Understanding what China's strategy will be to face the problem is much more effective, much more efficient than wanting to sell or guide solutions for the Chinese giant.
Western economic defense lines must make their calculations and projections from what the Chinese will do, not what they should do.
Let us remember that the Chinese state is not bound by legislative limits and check and balances that limit the performance of most developed countries of Western culture.
Big hug, Professor 𝗂𝗃𝗍 𝗊𝗋𝗋